All right, Meg Lysy, thank you so much for joining me on Alumless Takes. It's so good to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Meg, it has been really great to get to know you and the Alumni Relations team at Dartmouth College over the last couple of months, I suppose, really the last month or so. And one of the things that I realized as I was chatting to you, Megan, you're serving as the senior director for Alumni Relations, is I'm not really sure there's anyone on the planet who knows more about alumni admissions initiatives than you do. And so I wanted to take a couple of minutes to ask you about what you've been doing there at Dartmouth and to share some of your great work with the listeners of the podcast. Maybe I could just get you to start by sharing a bit about the programs that make up Dartmouth's suite of initiatives that involve alumni in the admissions process, either through volunteerism or providing insights. Just share a little bit about the scope and scale of the efforts there.
Sure, I'd love to. And I feel as though no conversation about my work doing admissions and alumni relations would be complete without saying that I learned everything I know at Georgetown. The 10 years I was at Georgetown in the admissions office, I ran their alumni interviewing program where the interview is required. And I had a boss named Charlie Deacon, who's been Dean of Admissions at Georgetown since 1972. And he's still dean there. And so I had this great 10-year experience at Georgetown. And then when I came to Dartmouth in 2015, brought with me all of the things I learned at Georgetown and love working for my alma mater and getting to do this great work at Dartmouth. So our program at Dartmouth, we have had an alumni interviewing program probably for more than 50, 60 years. Long history of Dartmouth alumni helping with the admissions process. And there are several roles that alumni can have in the admissions process. The fun that sort of happens in the spring of an applicant's junior year is the Dartmouth Book Award program. Dartmouth College has the oldest book award program in the country. And what this is that local alumni will go to local high schools, like alumni in their towns will go to the local high schools and award a Dartmouth Book Award to a high achieving junior. And at the awards night in the junior spring, the student will receive a Dartmouth book. It will be a beautiful book with a plate in it. And that is a great recruitment tool for Dartmouth because we're able to have the high schools help us identify talent. And to be honest, that's how one of the reasons I ended up at Dartmouth is because I won that award in my high school. So it's a
Okay.
great way for high schoolers to learn about Dartmouth. And we have
Yeah.
alumni on the ground who coordinate all of that. So in Boston alone, I think our book award chair awards 125 awards at 125 different high schools in Boston.
That's amazing. And so how many book awards does Dartmouth give out,
About
nationally or globally?
600. About 600.
600. Okay. And that's reflective of not like a one-to-one match necessarily in terms of alum and award, but because you mentioned someone in the Boston area gives out a large number of these, but
Mhm.
seems like a great way to involve alumni. You mentioned the interviewing component. Dartmouth has figured out how to scale the alumni interviewing program in ways I think, some schools might imagine would be an ideal scenario for them, and then others,
Mhm.
I suppose not. But what goes into that? How do you recruit and train and re-engage all of those volunteers?
Yeah. Yeah. So the biggest way alumni engage with admissions is through being an alumni interviewer. And we have any year between 6 and 8,000 interviewers sign up to be a volunteer that year. And they will interview maybe 18 to 20,000 Dartmouth applicants. And it's really great because admissions is getting insight into the applicants. It's wonderful to have someone who went to Dartmouth spend time with an applicant and then report back to the admissions office who they met, what that student's interest is like, when the student's eyes lit up when they were talking about a certain project. You get all of this really great information about the applicant because you get to spend time with them and hear their story. And for the alumni, they're able to keep connected to their local schools. They're able to help inform the next generation of Dartmouth by having a role in the admissions process. And to steward these volunteers, we think it's really important that they sign up annually. Every single year, our alumni have to recommit to the program and they have to agree to our code of conduct, our protection of minors policy. They need to agree to the confidentiality of the process. So I think annual signups is really important, and making sure that the interviewers understand that it's a pretty low time commitment. They can sign up. You can choose how many interviews you do when you sign up. And so you can say, I'm going to do one early decision interview and one regular decision interview, probably 2 hours of time. And so the alum is able to stay connected to Dartmouth, serve, give back, but really know what that is going to be, what's going to be part of that commitment, and understand they can check the box that they've done it, and understand what goes into that. So we love the alumni interview reports. And then when the students are admitted, we have an entire yield program that springs to life because every student who's admitted pretty much has a connection with an alum. And so we have a really nice yield moment that happens. I think for Dartmouth students to understand how strong our alumni community is from when they apply, their first interaction with Dartmouth is meeting with an alum. And for them to understand just how rich our network is, and that we have alumni that are volunteering their time to hear these student stories, and to help Dartmouth make the best admissions decisions possible, impresses our candidates. And for many students, it's their first interaction with Dartmouth. And we've seen a lot of our peer schools eliminate the alumni interviewing program. And for us, we're leaning into it because we just think the more information we know about our applicants, the more they can connect to the school. It's good for Dartmouth.
What is your sense as to why some of the peer institutions you're familiar with have been eliminating the program? It feels like a great way to scale volunteerism. Is it about control over the narrative, or like it's too much work maybe both, right?
Yeah, it's probably a combination of a lot of things. I would imagine, there's a fair bit of sort of oversight that you do with this program because you have volunteers meeting with minors, and you want to make sure that it's a really well-run program. And it's definitely a lot of work. I think your point about you are trusting volunteers to share your story and be ambassadors for your school. And I could see that that could go wrong sometimes. And so there's a little bit of a risk to that.
Yeah.
So for some schools, they might not be comfortable with that.
Yeah, I suppose it seems like a great idea, but then if you ran into a scenario by which, a student opted to not attend, right, because of a bad experience with a volunteer, then I suppose that's a pretty high risk moment potentially. Do you think an alumni interviewing program would be good at all colleges or universities, or is there a particular profile of a school that you think makes the most sense? Obviously, Dartmouth is an Ivy, a very prestigious school, right? And what makes the program particularly successful there?
There's a couple angles of how you can answer this, but for the applicants, the interview is an extra barrier to applying, I guess you could say. We're asking our applicants to spend time meeting with someone from Dartmouth. And so I think if you're a college that's trying to recruit and get more apps, you might look at this and say, wow, you are asking candidates to do more work with this, and that if we're trying to increase our applicant pools, maybe that's not for us. I could see that a college maybe thinking that way. I think we think that students appreciate that they get to tell their story. I think if you were to ask any applicant, do you want the opportunity to get to know the school better? Like, do you want to have that one-on-one moment to tell your story? Most applicants would want to do that. And we do survey all of the students that we admit, and we get really good response rates on the survey, probably because the students are still in high school and they're used to doing what is asked of them. But we do get a really nice response rate on our admitted student survey. And we have, as you'd imagine, the questions about the alumni interaction. And so we have data that shows us that this program is good for Dartmouth. Students like the experience with the alumni community, and it makes them more excited about Dartmouth. We have these verbatims that we get from hundreds of students just talking about how they were really touched that their alumni interviewer cared enough to meet with them, and that they were inspired by the stories and, experiences they heard from the alum from Dartmouth who they met with. But we do look at that carefully just to make sure that this program is serving us well, and helping us really get the best students to come to Dartmouth.
And because every student has an alumni interview, I suppose there's no sample population of those that don't, right?
Well, yeah, when I started Dartmouth in 2015, we were pretty close to interviewing everyone when our applicant pool was maybe 20,000 students. And now our applicant pool is north of 30,000. So we have not been able to interview everyone. And students do know that it's a program based on regional availability of the volunteers. We will send every single applicant that we have at Dartmouth to our local, we call them district enrollment directors, or DED for short. So every single applicant is sent to the lead volunteer in their region to coordinate the interview. And then it's up to the volunteer to find the resources to match that student with an interviewer. So it is too bad that not every student is matched with an interviewer. But like I said, we get about 18 to 20,000 interviews a year.
So, part of the evolution of the team there at Dartmouth has been a shifting in the org structure to sort of better enable the university and your alumni relations team to create more elaborate experiences, more creative experience, but also to interface with alumni through volunteerism in a way that is even more enhanced than previous. Can you talk a little bit about the change structure of alumni relations at Dartmouth and what it will mean for your work,
Sure.
or that particular program, the alumni admissions
Sure.
program?
Yeah, so before we had our reorganization, there was a team of 3 of us that worked on the alumni interviewing program exclusively. And now in our new model, we are having everyone in alumni relations touch the program in some way. And I think the benefit to the new model is that the district enrollment director for San Francisco is going to work with the alumni relations person who's working with San Francisco. And that person is going to know what the club is up to. And so let's just say that DED says, we need 10 more interviewers to sign up this year. We're low on our numbers and we really need your help with recruiting. The person in alumni relations now is the point person for the club and the DED and can bring them together and say, let's recruit more volunteers together. And before we were missing those synergies. So having this regional approach is going to help the alumni relations person understand the whole landscape and I think do a better job serving our volunteers.
Yeah, sort of looking across programs, right? Rather than
Yeah.
sort of being centered around a single program.
Yeah.
Awesome. Meg, at the end of each one of our Alumless Takes episode, we ask our guests for a recommendation of some sort. Could be work related, perhaps not. A book, a podcast, a movie, a show. What's a recommendation that you have for our listeners?
Yeah, I would recommend the Admissions Beat podcast. It is a podcast that's created and produced by the vice president for enrollment and admissions at Dartmouth. His name's Lee Coffin. And he developed this podcast during COVID to help families navigate the selective admissions process. And it continues to thrive. So if you're interested in admissions, you can't find a better resource.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan.